The reason I say that is because, well, maybe there are some people. I know my own taxes. I know what farm taxes and everything, and I'm just saying, gosh almighty, if I saw a tax bill come in $9.62, I'd be tickled pink. But it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. The average person, if he's got an assessment at 226,000, that's fine. But there are many over that, many over that. Anyways,
But Councillor,
so to me, it's misleading.
are there also many under that, though?
Yeah,
Possibly,
sure.
If you accept that as an average or median number.
This is, so through you, Mr. Chair, I disagree with that. This is a calculated number based on the 30,000 properties we have in Norfolk County, and this is the true average. And that it's a mathematical calculation.
Yeah, well, I just personally feel it's misleading to a taxpayer. But anyways, end of our conversation.
Okay, thank you. Good point, but carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now we are in a slide to talk about training and development, and I believe Mr. Cribbs wanted to have a few words to say.
I do. I think I might break the streak of going to the podium. What we'd like to suggest to you is today is an informational day. This is the one sort of what I'll qualify as or describe as a request or sales pitch to you that today's proceedings will contain. And specifically, this is around the item that is the training budget for county staff here at the Corporation of Norfolk County. As the slide indicates, and has long been the case well prior to my employment here, Norfolk defines itself quite publicly as a learning organization. We do this for a number of reasons, but all of which ultimately lead to us attempting as staff, we as staff, attempting to provide the best possible service we can. Here in 2017, or for the 2017 budget, a motion was passed and endorsed by this council to remove $100,000 from the county's training budgets. That actually equated at the end of the day to an $87,000 decrease rather than $100,000 because of the way the motion was worded and where the cuts were applied. Some of those monies were provincial funding in nature, so it didn't come to $100,000 off the levy, it came to $87,000. But at any rate, the motion was for $100,000 in cuts to specific areas, and that was complied with. This is the opportunity, and I wish to communicate to you, the ask is that County Council consider restoring 50% of that cut. So it was $87,100, and half of that is $43,550. So we have not built a budget. We've built a budget to comply with the 2017 cuts, so without an increase to them. We are asking to be able to present to you a budget, either this is a line item or the training budgets with this increase in, either way, to restore 50% of the cut to 2017. The pragmatic, so as to understand why we make that ask, I'd like to give you 3 examples of the impact it's had upon our operations and why we're not asking for all of the money back, but half. I take from Mr. Cridland's operations, we have only one human being employed in our staff who has the credentials necessary to conduct playground inspections. That individual happens to be a fairly senior manager on the Sunshine List. We are obligated in the summer months to conduct weekly inspections of our playgrounds. And so what we've been doing is very inefficiently allocating resources in that area because we only have one person who can do that work. We have not been able to train other staff to conduct that activity, which we would like to do, so as to bring down the cost of providing that service. Secondly, with respect to our arena operations, there's a basic refrigeration course and then a more advanced certification. We use ammonia to ultimately provide coolant, as is fairly common in the industry. I say this not as fear tactic, but as honest illustrative example. In October of this year, two municipal employees and a contractor were killed in British Columbia because of an ammonia leak at a municipal rink, dealing with very similar equipment to what we operate here in Norfolk County. In this area, the budget cut resulted in a training budget of $15,700 because of retirement, staff turnover. We've had to provide some training to new individuals, and in fact, that area, to meet basic statutory requirement, has now overspent. We spent $23,400 with no real choice in the matter. But we still don't have all the certifications we need or want to have for our arena staff to work with the cooling technologies available to us. In public health, we've had to cut training in nonviolent conflict management, which is considered necessary for all of those who work with the public, and we've only been able to provide that to certain frontline staff because of the cuts there. And lastly, with respect to finance, we have 6 individuals we're proud to announce who are working towards their certified professional accounting designations, i.e. to become certified accountants, CPA. And that will absolutely benefit this corporation when they finish, but those 6 individuals are now going at half speed because of a 50% cut. Conjunctively, I use those as illustrative examples only. The real problem with a cut to training budgets is that the next day the sun rises and the sun sets. Nothing immediately falls apart, which is why I wasn't here. I assume that's one of the reasons why that was considered a reasonable, a good cut to make in a difficult budget year. But I wanted to illustrate at this point in time the very real operational problems we are experiencing because a 50% cut was too, $100,000 cut, beg pardon, was too large at the time. So we are asking for 50%, which is to say the 43,000 and change for your consideration. You do have the capacity to provide us with some direction, if you are so inclined, as to how we might approach doing that at budget time, either as an initiative from yourself or to build those numbers, that 50% that we're asking for, back into budgets. We have some flexibility as to that. That's sort of the extent of the point, and I'd like to take questions if you have any.
Okay, I have 3 speakers so far, David, but I just, from a procedural perspective, I want to ask the first question only, and that is, should council give some consensus or informal direction today, for example, to agree to that request that a 50% restoration of that cut, in other words, 50% goes back in, would that still be subject to full and final review and approval in the January budget discussions? I guess my question to you, James, on that, or to David. In other words, even if we consent today, we have one more kick at it once we see the bottom line numbers in January, is my question.
We have multiple ways of complying, but you do not bind yourself today by instructing us to bring back something for your consideration.
Okay, that's my question, and you've answered it. Mayor Luke, then Councillor Black, then Councillor Columbus.
Well, I partly got my answer, and that is this request is being asked of us today. And I appreciate the heads up, but I didn't think today we were going to start adding or taking away. I thought that was for January. So I am not going to support any direction today, and I haven't seen the rest of this package, and maybe there's something in here that will suggest reducing the budget. I don't think so. I don't know. So respectfully, I am going to take the stand here that we leave this. And when we get together on January the 24th, and I don't mind any type of report coming in that day to consider these things, but I don't think this meeting today is to start looking for council to say we want this added or this taken away. So that's my stand.
Thank
But
you.
I do appreciate the heads up, sir, of where SLT is coming from.
Councillor Black?
Really, what you're saying, David, is what prompted myself, and I think Councillor Oliver was the seconder to the notice of motion, because at the last budget session, it wasn't a normal procedure that I generally experienced in past budgets to be arbitrary in our cuts. And in the end, a lot of the cuts became arbitrary with no staff input. And I had a big problem with that, and as a result, that's where my notice of motion came forward, supported by Councilor Oliver and the rest of council, thinking it was a good idea to look at something different. Because in my mind, it was not fair to do that without having staff input. And now, exactly, this is what's happened. You're coming back to us because we did something without the benefit of staff input. And lo and behold, without that, we lost $13,000. You know, we cut $100,000, not realizing, because we didn't ask staff, you know, about, well, what really is the value of that? It wasn't $100,000, it was only $87,000. So my approach would, if we're going to do anything, and I've said it before, if this council, rather than deal with this, and I don't care if we deal with it or don't, but maybe the best approach, it would be to look at it all. This is our review. Let's relax. Let's not get into all the details today. And if we're not happy with this bottom line today, we can really think about it as a council and say, well, we don't like the, whatever it is, the 6%. Let's ask staff to come back with a 4% or a 5%. And then that way they can review it and say, well, here's the best place to take it out. And then bring it back to us. And if we still don't like that, that's our opportunity to bring it down further with. And I will hope that the council will ask staff, what is the ramifications of this particular cut? If council wants to do a cut, ask staff, get their input, so we know the ramifications, so we don't have something like this coming back. So in the end, rather than your report and addressing it now, I mean, I have no problem sending it back to you and saying, well, what really is your need on the training? And let's address the real need, rather than looking at, you know, sort of tweaking it around. So that would be my perspective on it. And I don't know if David wants to comment on that, or if James wants to comment on it.
We have a carefully construed day. We are about to go through a number of the initiatives. We're going to try not to get into specifics, great detail, just to give you some background or some vague concepts so you can have months to think about the initiatives and sort of mull them over. We're treating this item differently for a couple of reasons, and you have to understand that, so this is, I would describe it as procedurally irregular, but there is unanimous and very strong agreement from your senior leadership team as to the necessity of this item, which is why we treat it differently from all the others and why it gets a message from your county manager. So partially we're treating it differently so as to distinguish it in your minds from the rest of the process. Further, and unlike the other item, this isn't a discrete item. The reason we do it this way is otherwise we'd be trying to propose tiny little changes, 5,000 here. You might recall how the cut was instituted, but it's 10,000 here, 8,000 there. So we'd have to do 10, 11, 12 other individual items. It's absolutely inappropriate for us to build a budget with new training dollars after you very clearly exercised your will by making specific cuts, for us to come back next year with new numbers built in unless you instruct us to do so. So this will be, unless there's some sort of positive, I fully understand where Mayor Luke comes from, but in this instance, we will not build in budget items or budget numbers for training that do anything other than reflect the cuts you made for 2017, unless this council gives us some indication that it would like to hear or like to have for its consideration, in this case, the spending item. So it will not be at the budget session in January unless we receive some sort of guidance from you in the positive. Otherwise, the cut will.
What about direction in terms of more general in nature to direct you to come back with a true budget need for training and development? Would that help? No?
Well, the thing is, in the broader picture, we're trying to comply with both the spirit and the direct wording of the motions that you brought and that the council endorsed with respect to changing how we approach budget. And today is a big, major component of that, and the other component will be, as Mr. Johnson indicated, we're going to try to keep the relatively high-level numbers so that we don't get into the 20,000 different accounts, to go through the new initiatives, the council-approved initiatives, and then we hope that when we get to the operating, that there's some capacity to treat that budget more or less as business as usual. So you look at the extraordinary, the new items, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and we get to that portion, which we think will follow both the letter and, more importantly, the spirit of the motion that was passed by council to change how you go about that business. To have a training initiative that we end up having to argue specific items and line by line will get us into the details that, broadly speaking, you normally try to avoid during a budget process, which, amongst other things, avoids a 4-day process and makes it a 1 or a 2-day process. So to try to comply with that the spirit of that motion, this is somewhat irregular, but we're bringing this to your attention now so that day, it may well be the will of council. You don't wish to hear anything more about restoring a cut to training. That is most certainly your right. If what I said earlier as to why your senior staff are unanimous in their support for doing this, carries weight, carries the day, then the item will be included, and generally speaking, we hope we've already given the rationale now, and not to get into the specific items in every area what that training, because it's across the board rather than an item specific.
Yeah, okay, you know what, based on what you're saying and what this is, I'm going to try a motion, and the motion would read, as the county manager is asking, that restoration of the 50% of the cut. That's what you're asking, right? According to
Councillor,
this.
Will you allow that we get our other two speakers before I entertain
whatever,
your
yeah,
motion?
that's-
Okay, keep it ready, and.
But is
and I'm-
that okay? Is that what you're looking for? That's what it
Yeah,
says, right?
I think that's essentially what they would be asking for, whether it needs a motion or a consensus around the table at this point, since we're informal today, and we're not binding ourselves with motions. We've been told that. Nothing we do today can't not be undone in January at the full budget
So
session.
not necessarily a motion that you're looking for, just direction.
We would happily accept direction.
Okay, well,
So keep-
then I'll forget the motion, and then when time comes,
Yep.
just direction.
Thank you very much. Councillor Columbus next, and then Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Dave, I know in the past, the county has covered registration and costs for staff who are pursuing an MBA, master's, or PhD. Are we still doing that?
We do have a corporate policy, the specifics of which, it might be unfair. Mr. Sluchenkov is only 2 months on the job. He may not have entire working familiarity with it, but I bet he's looking it up on the corporate intranet as I speak. That being said, we do offer the 6 individuals who are pursuing their accounting designations. For instance, that is one of the, to my mind, one of the 3 major drivers. Norfolk County does contribute towards those costs, and with half the money, they're taking, I believe, 1 course a year rather than 2, and it will take twice as long if my mathematics hold out. So we do offer that. That's a fairly common, not just in the municipal world, but any large corporation typically supports educational objectives that are tied to one. We do have language in there. It's been a while since I've read it, but there does have to be a correlation between, so it won't help a planner get a degree in biology, we would help them study, get a master's degree in urban planning or rural planning, for instance. It has to have some correlation to what you do for a living. But yes, we do have that program.
So how much do we contribute, and does the employee get time off to attend those courses and that type of thing?
Well, it's hard to give a universalist answer. We have people who, for instance, work shift work. We offer help to paramedics, for example. So time off for classes we do not pay people as a default to attend class in a post-secondary institution rather than come to work here. That's a fair statement. As opposed to, do some people move shifts around? Are people expected to fund if time through vacation? Yes. Change shifts at a 24-hour facility like long-term care work? Yes. So I don't mean to avoid your question. It's just that our world is more complicated than a simple yes/no. But as a broad proposition, you wouldn't pay me to go sit in a classroom and try to get another degree.
MBAs and a PhD, that consumes a lot of dollars, I would think, compared to some skill that you need for running the arenas would be quite different.
Okay, Councillor, good point. I think, did you get sufficient answer? We do cost share, and where the corporation deems the training is appropriate for the person and the job that person does. Okay? Sorry, Councillor Breton next.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. I agree with the mayor wholeheartedly here. In the past, and this has been my understanding, first of all, that $100,000 cut is not all the training we provided. It was a portion of it, okay? When we get into the budget, we usually start digging in the weeds, as we call it, and I want to see if how do I put it? I would like to see details by department. If they want to train somebody in the arena for 2 days at some course, give me the details, how many, how much, where maybe, and we'll go from there. And those are the kind of line items I like to see. And I like to know exactly what it's going to cost us. And if we got too many taking that training, maybe we have to cut back. I would hope we hire people with some background in what we hire them for. Now, you mentioned 6 people working on their CA, am I correct? Well, if we need 6 people with a CA designation, we should have hired them. I have no problem with some people getting training, but I've had the experience in the past where you train people and then they have to leave. So how much of that should we provide? I don't know. I guess to be a good corporation, you should train your people, but there's a difference in conferences, training, and seminars. And too many times those things were bulked together, we couldn't sort them out. So I'm prepared at budget time to leave this be, bring me the details of who you want to train, who you want to send to seminars, and we'll deal with it. And if it takes more than adding 50%, maybe we've got to add 100%, I don't know. And I'm prepared to do that if it's justified. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not asking for a response at this point, County Manager, because I'm going to give one myself to that, but.
Oh, very good.
Councillor, your very point about asking to get into those kind of details is one of the things that when I saw this meeting coming up today, it was my hope that we as a council would give some direction in terms of that. I, for one, for example, don't wish to see the kind of detail that you've just described. And it's going to be difficult for staff to know what to do for council in general, because there will be that kind of discrepancy. And it would be my hope that we can provide some detail or direction today in terms of how much of that in the weeds stuff we want to get into for the 2018 budget. That's just an observation. I'm well aware of that. Okay, that's my speakers list unless there are others. Mayor Luke, would you like to speak again?
Second time, I don't know if Mr. Sluchenkov has this available. And again, I feel like I'm getting down into January 24th meeting, but I would like to know for 2017 what the county budget was for training and how much was spent of that budget. I'm sure most of it was, but these are things that I need to know to make a good decision. So anyhow.
Sorry, Mayor Luke, I think the county manager first, and then if Mr. Slachenkoff, if we needs to add, we will.
With respect to specific training dollars, in 2016, and the intention in 2017 was to spend $487,000 on collectively what you would describe as training and development on those different items. You removed $100,000, which had a levy impact of 87. I hope, and perhaps I wasn't clear, but the reason why we specifically cite playground inspections and cooling in Parks and Rec is that it is our position that the cut of that magnitude got right into the bone. We went there wasn't any fat, but even if you don't accept that premise, it went past fat and it went past muscle right into bone, into our capacity to operate properly. That is our submission to you. So 487,200 down to 387,200.
And you were going to give us the 2016 number, were you?
Well, that
Did you?
was roughly
yes or no?
487,200
Oh,
as
okay,
well.
so that's based, the 2017 was based roughly on the 2016s, and then we reduced it. Mayor Luke?
Correct.
So those were the budget figures? Those were the
Yes.
budget figures?
Yes, that was the,
Correct.
that was.
So
the
what is
original.
the actual for 2017? I know we're not through the year, but do we have that
How
information?
close can we be on a year-to-date actual for 2017? Do we have a number at all, James?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are not finished our year-end projections yet for 2017, so I would hesitate to give that number unless you wanted to really take it with a grain of salt that we are only like partway through.
Well,
the
my
year.
final comment is this. Some of the examples our county manager has given us, there's no question that training has to be done. In the case of ammonia training for arena leaks, absolutely. You got my support 100%. But what other training is there that maybe isn't that important? We got to look at the whole picture here. It was a drastic cut last year, I will admit. But hopefully in January, everything will be on the table for council to scrutinize and put it into perspective as to what we need to cut to reach the level of taxation for 2018 that we can live with. But at the same time, Mr. Chair, we can run the county properly with. It takes money to run a county. It takes money to provide services. But I'll be very interested to know at the end of the year, of the 387,200, how much of that was spent and if there was any that wasn't spent. Don't know. Let's find out.
Thank you for that. Yakov, do you have anything to add on this specific point at this?
I do. I'd like to provide some sort of general commentary on the topic and perhaps bring you to the actual policy statement that I think pertains to some of the things that the councillors are talking about. And the name of the slide and both the name of the policy is training and development. So a lot of the conversations we're having in this room is specifically about the training component, and it is about what do you need to do your job right now, and so from a critical perspective immediately, and some of the sort of additional articulation about MBAs or master's degrees and PhDs. So the specific policy statement in the policy talks about employee for financial assistance must have a direct application to present or anticipated future job requirements. And that, to me, is key when we're talking about the development of our staff, and quite honestly, as an attraction and retention tool. So when Norfolk went about and projected itself an organization that's into learning, and a learning organization, an organization that supports that learning, I can tell you that is a recruitment tool, that is an attraction and retention tool, because we are known by applicants an organization that fosters that development, not only for the specific tasks that they're doing today, but also that they're interested in their general development and in their careers as professionals, and that when those other opportunities arise in the organization, at higher levels of responsibility, at higher levels of authority, that they're positioned to succeed in those, and that the organization isn't going to be in a position, which sometimes it ends up being in a position when there's no funding for future responsibilities, is that it's forced to go outside every single time. And so what we're seeing from a job application perspective, when we're going out and we're recruiting for high-skilled professionals with a lot of designations and requirements that those industries require, we're unable to attract those professionals. So a lot of the training we do with our current staff is because we want to be in positions where we have those skill sets and qualifications and education internally, and we're able to position those individuals to succeed elsewhere, or alternatively, so that we are not in situations where these individuals are going to other organizations where they're able to pursue both those training opportunities and career development opportunities. So I just wanted to reinforce a little bit more about the development piece, and that the policy statement talks about future anticipated opportunities and not just about what do you need to do your job today. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go back to Councillor Black in a moment, but and I'll get you as well, Councillor Brunton. I guess, James, a request that on behalf of council I'll make to you with respect to this training and development budget item, it would be my request that you try your very best within the department to have an approximate year-end actual expenditure number for us for 2017 as we begin our discussions on the 2018. I think that would be helpful to council to know that, if it can be done. So you don't need to respond, I'm just asking.
Well, I'd like to respond because
Okay.
that's something that we do provide with the budget deliberations in January. There is a column in your budget document that you will get.
Previous year.
And it has the previous year actuals there. But keep in mind that there is a portion of those actuals that's projected, and that's something that we will work on between now and then.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Brunton, on this same topic?
I just wondered if, we've had this in the past where we go into every department and they have it all broken down, conferences, seminars, and training, I think, in each department. What if we could bulk all that into one item for the whole Norfolk County, like, so we know, and give us some details. You know, it's, rather than we have to dig into each one and ask, well, where are you going for this seminar? Where are you going for this conference? If we had it all in one spot for the entire county, that we don't have to dig into every department for it. Could we have that? Is that a possibility? Because we always end up going through every department and digging in down and asking so many questions. If it was on one sheet or one area where we could look at all of them, it would be very helpful. That's a question I have, I guess.
Anything is possible, but I'm going to allow the county manager to answer, Councillor, but again, I, for one, feel that's why we've got an SLT team. They're the ones that know who needs to take what training. Number one, I don't know, and number two, that's why we hire them. But
Yeah.
do you want to comment on that any further? I guess the simple answer, David, can you provide us with that kind of detail, assuming council wants it?
We cannot, because the whole budget implodes with that
Yeah.
level of detail. Respectfully, you have given us a motion to sort of do things at a higher level. Respectfully, you pay 7 people sunshine-less salaries so as to manage and make those decisions. Respectfully, it's a $208 million organization, and the elected officials who act as the Board of Governors do not typically get into, do you attend Conference A or Conference B? That is well below your purview. You're here to provide us with strategic guidance and direction to move this community forward, not to decide Conference A or Conference B. And if we do that level of detail, we cannot functionally get through a budget. We are doing our very best to adhere to your instruction to come back with a higher level discussion at the operating budget, as opposed to getting into how much we spend on pens, paper, and erasers. That's not the type of budget we're trying to present to you, specifically because everything becomes impossible and unworkable. With respect to the larger question, could we aggregate the training dollars in one area? The answer to that, we've had some conversations at the SLT level about any number of items, that being one of them, as to whether in future years it would be more appropriate to put all the training money in one pot, presumably under Mr. Sluchenkov, and then have the rest of the corporation apply to it. That is a possibility. We're trying to work through, I'll defer to Mr. Johnson. There is some logic. We're looking at centralizing versus decentralizing, and there are arguments in both favors. There are accounting arguments in both ways. I'm sure Mr. Johnson wants to address those. We most certainly are considering that for some degree of ease, but even assuming we centralized everything and that there was one training budget, we would not be inclined, and pursuant to this council's own motion, we would not provide a list of 80 conferences, 50 certificates, and a partridge in a pear tree, that level of specificity.
Well, Councillor Oliver, I'm not going to get into the argument today, but I disagree with that. We're talking about 387,000, I think you said, for 2017. That's a significant figure if it is for training. All I'm asking for, and I'm the type of person, I like to know details. And I'm sure every county manager we've got here knows where they want to go to a conference, what seminars they think they would like to take, and how much training their staff needs. I don't think that's too much to ask. That's, put it on paper and show me. Maybe we need to raise that up to $600,000. I don't know. And I'd support that if it's all justified. But it's like this. My kids used to say, I need $10. I'm going to the show, Dad. I said, well, the show only costs $5. What are you doing with the other $5? That's the bottom line. Okay? Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Wells?
Deputy Mayor, do we have a motion?
Not yet, but I'm trying to get there. You were the last new hand that I saw go up, and,
Well, didn't Councillor Black move something?
well, Councillor, he was prepared to wait until
Oh.
I had allowed the other speakers, and then I'm hoping and assuming he may put something out by way of direction.
Well, I hope so too, Mr. Chair. We have certainly spent a lot of time on
Yes,
this.
we
I think
have.
everybody has had input, and now I think it's time for the question, yes or no?
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. Just to remind council too, there is a requirement now for staff to report to council for approval on any out-of-province travel. That was a big thing during the last election. So anytime there's out-of-province travel, there needs to be a report that comes forward and you need to review it and approve it. Part of the discussion that happened previously around a lot of these things was that there was MFIPA restrictions that really made staff hesitant to release a lot of information to council. There could be staff that are on performance improvement plans and letting you know they might be the only person in that position in the organization, and letting you, making it public that that position is taking that training is something that would really identify some people. So there are some specific privacy concerns around employees getting training as well. That was part of the issues raised previously. But I just wanted to mention that nobody can go out of province without council's approval.
Thank you for that reminder. So, Councillor Black, are you in a position where you'd like to put something forward? I've conferred with the clerk, and we can do this as a consensus. I can seek consensus with a show of hands. We do not require a mover and seconder or a formal motion.
Well, and I'd like to see if there is any kind of consensus around the council by giving direction to staff to address their concerns with the training development and their ask of restoration of 50% of the cut.
Okay?
According to this page.
Yep. The training and development slide,
Yeah.
and it's a roughly $43,500 amount that would be reinstated in the draft budget when we see it in January. Could I ask for a show of hands to show support for this suggestion around the table, please? Okay, Councillor, thank you for that, and staff, you've got your direction on this item. Should we move forward, James? Oh, Mayor Luke, before we move on.
Well, again, this item can be discussed on January the 24th session, along with many, many other items of the budget that will be discussed. This isn't to say we're not going to support this, it's just saying this isn't the time. That's the way I read it.
Thank you. Okay. Still on this topic,
Yes,
Councillor
I
Clements?
agree, because I may support more than that. If the numbers are there, we find out how much was allocated and spent this year. Thanks.
And Councillor Black.
I'm wondering why the county manager is shaking his head.
Well,
And this-
he did explain to us that based on the rather specific direction at the last budget deliberation to remove that amount, I think staff feel it's inappropriate for them to put dollars back in that undo what we did. Councillor?
Is that the answer, dude?
I happen to think it's openly insubordinate for us to include those numbers that will not be included. You have expressed your will clearly. So this was us going out on a limb to try to convey to you our thoughts on the issue. We respect your direction, but we won't be including the matter, there won't be a discrete
So-
item on the budget.
So there won't be any opportunity to put this back in the budget in January?
Correct.
This is correct.
That was the impression I got from our county manager before we looked for our consensus. I understand, Councillor. Yep. Councillor Wells, did I see your hand again?
It seems to me we made a decision. Could we move on to another topic?
Thank you. James, please proceed.
So now we will start going into the new budget initiatives. So the way I propose that we do this is we go slide by slide, and if council has any questions about any of these initiatives, the general managers are here to answer them. Part of this meeting is to get some feedback from council on these initiatives and other items, and that will give finance and as well as the other departments some direction in January on some of these initiatives and whether either to include them, not include them, or tell us to go back and sharpen our pencils or what have you. This is an unprecedented item where we're showing council basically new budget initiatives and lists well before the budget process. So this is a new thing for us to do. So any guidance or feedback is very well appreciated. So this first slide is the new budget initiatives ranked 1, and these totals here will tie into the slide that Kathy was speaking about. So these are basically new budget initiatives that we have little or no control about, reason being that they're legislated, so you can see those there. They total $156,000, so if there's any items there that you would wish to discuss, if I see any hands.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I certainly would like to look at the Port Dover traffic operations and parking. The study area will be designated downtown business. We are looking at spending $95,000 on a study. Do I read that correctly? To find out whether Port Dover needs parking? Do I read that correctly?
I'm going to ask Ms. Robinson to give us a bit of an overview.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Council, we all know that Port Dover needs parking. The intention of this was included as a resolution from Council. July 11th, 2017, a resolution was passed to include this in the budget. This was to look at resolutions for the parking situations as well as the traffic concerns that we're currently experiencing in Dover. This is not to say whether or not we need it, this is to figure out how to fix it.
Okay, I think I brought forth the motion to look at the possibility of buying a lot where we would park vehicles and maybe put a washroom on that as well. I don't understand why we need a study. The community needs more parking. The community needs a washroom. What am I missing here, Mr. Chair? And I'm sorry for I'm not being obstinate, I just don't understand. I'd rather put that $95,000 towards the purchase of the said property. And now I'll stop.
Anything further, Lee?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Council, certainly staff can certainly do that. Unfortunately, when you don't look at something as a holistic matter, you just create more isolated problems all over the place. A very good example would be the hospital here in Simcoe. The parking from the hospital keeps moving out, and we get repeated complaints every time we adjust the parking here. People move around and they just move to a different area and they're parking, and then the complaints come from that. If we don't look at this systematically in terms of appropriate parking for levels, where people are headed, how it's going to move, addressing the traffic concerns, we're just going to be pushing problems all over that entire area, and it's not going to adequately address the matters that council has brought forward for staff to consider. This is the resolution, was to study it. The resolution was not to go purchase a piece of property. It was to undertake a study to determine the appropriate courses of action, the different things that are needed to address the traffic and the parking in Port Dover.
Okay, I think, I know there's no resolution, Councillor, but again, I think staff aren't asking for resolutions on particular items at this point today. This will be one that we'll perhaps pay some more attention to and do some of our own homework. Councillor Geisens?
Yes, I just have a question. I'm on the ranking 1, and we're down to, it says $156,000. Has that been included on the page that, actually, sorry, I got the wrong one, that is $86,361,800? Or
Yes.
is that going to be added on?
It's in there already.
It's in there already, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions on this slide of these NBIs? Councillor Brunton?
When I go through all these here, these different rankings, whatever they are they already taken into account in the 7.5 we dealt with?
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
in there. So, yeah, so what you're saying is, do we agree with them now, but we will get another kick at the can later, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Councillor Columbus?
So right now, we are just treating all this as.
Councillor Brunton,
All
mics,
this is
please.
information. We're not taking anything out, putting it in again.
Well, I think that was the direction that staff came to this meeting with. If, council, in spite of what our colleague from Port Dover says, we do have authority sometimes. If you feel the need to take a specific direction on something, given that that has implications for the budget in January, that is our prerogative as council. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor. You do have that right, but I don't think that was the intent for this meeting today. Meaning, get
Just
some...
information and deal with it at budget time.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Further on this particular slide, these are the priority 1 items as ranked by senior leadership, and they have been included in the draft levy information that would show $86,361,000 and an 8.5% overall increase in the levy before allowance for estimated growth. Yes, sir.
And
This
so,
page or the next page?
well, I can read, I guess, and I'm just at the end of the new budget initiatives.
Okay, sorry, Doug, but you're now on the ranking 2 ones or the ranking 3 ones? At the top of each page, you'll see a ranking 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, and I've looked at them, but I guess what I'm trying to determine is, I believe the county manager said all this is already in the budget that we've dealt with figure-wise, money-wise. But it also shows for all the different rankings, the number of full-time equivalents. So
Yes.
they've been included in the budget sessions also. So that means if we adopted all these, we would add in the 3 rankings, 10.8 staff. Correct? Okay, thank you. I just want to get clear on that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you, Councillor. I want to just flip back, sorry, Councillor Geisens, which page are you on, if you don't mind? At the top left? Okay. Yeah, that's a very good question. Who can answer that one for us? Mr. Cridlin? We're talking about fire training officer, and the description says to continue that position, and it shows a 1 FTE, but no levy impact associated with it.
Through the chair, I can start the discussions. Yes, this was approved last year as a permanent part-time position, and what staff, it was explained last year's budget, they were able to go through the budget, and by having an in-house training officer, we were saving funds in contracting out training, record-keeping, that sort of thing. So we've been able to find funds within the fire budget to fully fund this position. However, it was permanent part-time, and what we're asking for now is this to be a permanent full-time position.
Okay.
But there is a zero levy impact, as stated.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Yes. Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions? Let's just flip back to the number 2, ranking number 2 page first before we do further on number 3. Anything further from any member of council on any of the projects NBIs listed as ranked 2? Again, obviously there are FTE implications, but as Councillor Brunton pointed out, we'll see these for sure in January. Councillor Wells?
Just a quick one on the tipping fee on ranking number 2. Purpose of tipping fee study is to review the current tipping fee rates. Do we have problems with the present tipping fee rates, or is there a reason that this is in here?
Lee, please.
I'm not sure exactly where you're headed with your question.
I thought it was pretty clear. Purpose of the tipping fee study is to review the current tipping fee rates. I'm
Yes.
asking, do we have a problem now? Are we looking at increasing the rates? Or?
Oh, it's, council's direction is that we're supposed to be doing full cost recovery with the fees that we have. So every few years we go through and we do that. With all of the changes that we've currently experienced with solid waste, with respect to the new disposal mechanisms that we're using, the new contracts, et cetera, it's time to review it again to see if we're actually still at full cost recovery, at which point we'll bring that back to council for their consideration.
That's all I wanted to know, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
You're welcome. Thanks for that explanation, Lee. Councillors, just check your microphones for me if you don't mind. I see 2 that are on. Any further questions on the ranked 2 new budget initiatives? Seeing none, any further questions on the 2 or 3 sheets of ranked 3 new budget initiatives? Councillor Brunton.
What is an inclusion support team?
Inclusion support team.
Yeah, hire part-time.
That would be Mr. Cridlin from the looks of the description.
1.5 full-time equivalents.
Through the chair to Councillor Brunton. Yes, this is asking for, I'll make sure I get my numbers right here. The 1.5 FTEs is made up of a 0.9 of students, and a 0.6 would be a permanent part-time staff. And what staff are hoping to do is along the lines of, I believe it's EBS number 54, the policies, to eliminate barriers and improve accessibilities for people in need. So within our programming, all of our programming, we have a large amount of children. I think the stats are, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's 1 in 9 that some have some sort of disability, whether it's mental, physical, or emotional. And as we go along in society, we have to be able to offer the same programming to these students, or these children this age. And at present, Norfolk County is not, a lot of our, we need a coordinator to throw the programs together, see what the needs are, contact the schools, see what the numbers could be coming in. At present, it's a tough battle to include these children in some of our programming. So it's thought that the 0.6 permanent part-time would work, I believe it's 3 days a week, putting the program together. The 0.9 would be probably 2 students, maybe 3, to help with the children. And obviously this isn't only a summer time sort of thing with their day camps. It could be our pool, anything we offer. So the students would be available year-round, depending on how we hire them. We'd look ahead.
Another question, if I may, through you to Mr. Cridlin. The Delhi swimming pool, the staff there, are any of those staff brought back to the Simcoe pool, or are they all just summer employees? Like, are they, how are they treated?
They're through the chair. Some staff are Simcoe staff that are sent there for the summer, and then they're replaced with students in Simcoe, and then there's some summer students in the Delhi pool.
So there's no real increase in staff other than students?
Other than students, there's no increase in staff.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. With regard to the fire and rescue services are requesting to purchase flow rating ID disc. Do we know what those are for 30 grand?
Through the chair to Councillor Wells. Yeah, this is a bit of a joint project with our Public Works friends. And the $30,000 is to buy colored discs for the fire hydrants. And they range anywhere from $6 to $9, depending on what type of disc they go on. So therefore, identification for when fire services pull up to a fire. A quick view has a color red, which is coded for so much capacity. A flow, a blue is something I don't know the colors myself, so it's for quick assessment. And what it prevents is for a firefighter hooking up to a hydrant and over-pumping that hydrant, damaging either the fire equipment or, worse yet, the water infrastructure.
Councillor Wells, further?
Well, I know that every fire hydrant is flushed. Am I correct?
You are correct.
And while those people are there flushing the hydrant, couldn't they take some paint and just paint the top of the hydrant rather than buying something different? Wouldn't that work just as well?
Through the chair, I may look at Lee Robinson for an answer. I think the painting has been looked at, but I think the thought is that the discs are cheaper. When the flushing program is on, this where Public Works staff would come in, they take the cap off, they put the disc on, so there's no real cost in installing them, but I think the belief is that the ring lasts longer and cheaper.
Do you want to verify that, Ms. Robinson, or otherwise?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Council, yeah, Mr. Cridlin is correct with that. We did evaluate different ways of doing this, and it was significantly cheaper. In order to have the appropriate paint, because each hydrant may very well be different, to have all of that in all of the different vehicles, when you can have a small box of these discs, they've got to do all of the work pretty much to install them anyway, that it was actually a faster install to do it this way than it was to have to deal with the painting on a regular basis.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and that answers my question. And could I ask one other question?
Sure.
With regard to the property management coordinator position, and I see that the increase is $26,000, does that include benefits? Or is that $26,000 extra salary and then benefits on top of that?
Yakov, I think that would be within your department.
I believe that's an all-in figure.
Okay,
All
that's
in
all
figure?
I wanted to know, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
You're welcome. Brunton and then Black, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm at the bottom there, the POA position there, right on the bottom. And it says they want to bring that person on for another, well, 0.6, I guess. And I realize we're not making the decision today, but for me to make a good decision on that, I need to see the figures. What that place is running, like how much, last I heard we brought in $1 million, but we spent 900,000 or some crazy figure like that. Don't quote me on the figures, but I think it's very important because we did talk about possibly contracting that whole operation last year, if I remember right. And that's, you know, that was brought up at budget time, if you remember. And so we need to see those figures. That's all I'm suggesting when the time comes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Black, still on the priority 2 items or ranking 2?
Yeah, to Chris Baird, you know, the Port Dover West secondary plan, I thought I saw that on a previous budget, like last year, or was that deferred? And so it's showing up again this year, is that what it is, or?
Through the chair, good memory, Councillor Black. We did put it in last year, although the amount was insufficient to do what has to be done. It was originally for a small parcel of that larger area. And in consultation with Public Works, we need to look at transportation, water, wastewater, how we're going to service that, 800-odd acre parcel. And so that previous funds that were budgeted, that account was closed, the money goes back or wherever Mr. Johnson puts it back into. We've rebudgeted this year, and I can confirm to council that that whole parcel has been purchased by one developer, and that would ultimately create probably an additional 1,800 to 2,000 new dwellings. So it's critical that the county get ahead of the game, make sure that we have a plan in place to get the roads and all the things that Public Works requires. We require this funding now to do this. This is funded through the Development Charge Reserve. It's exactly what it's for. New growth pays for new growth. So that's where that came from.
So, and this is like from the current boundary of